Welcome to the Stark Reflections on Writing and Publishing podcast. There has never been a better time for writers. More information, options, and opportunities are available to you, but navigating these requires insight. Join Mark Leslie Lefebvre as he draws upon more than a quarter century of experience as a writer, a bookseller, and a trusted book industry consultant to explore and reflect on the writing and publishing landscape to help you make informed choices on your writer journey.
Hello, Reflectives, and welcome to episode 92 of the Stark Reflections podcast. This is your host, Mark Leslie Lefebvre. In this episode, I interview M.L. Buchman. Now, Matt started the first of over 60 novels, 100 short stories, and a fast-growing pile of audiobooks while flying from South Korea to ride his bicycle across the Australian outback, part of a solo around-the-world trip that ultimately launched his writing career in thrillers, science fiction, fantasy, and romance, specifically military romance. His titles have been named Barnes & Noble and NPR Top 5 of the Year and 3-time Booklist Top 10 of the Year, as well as being a Top 20 modern masterpiece in romantic suspense. As a 30-year project manager with a geophysics degree who has designed and built houses, flown and jumped out of planes, and solo sailed a 50-foot ketch, he is awed by what's possible. And it is amazing what is possible when you put your mind to it, and you'll learn about that from Matt. We talk about so many of the different projects he's working on, as well as a really important project that is related to one of his books, which is estate planning for authors, and it is your final letter and why you need to write it now. Now, there'll be a special giveaway for that book, which I think is critically important for writers, and I'll talk about that in a bit more detail after the interview. In the meantime, I'd like to welcome new patron Kathy Mack to the podcast. Kathy, welcome to the small but powerful group of patrons who support this podcast on a monthly basis. And you can support the podcast for $1, $3, or $5 a month and get access to additional content, including this week, I just released a special patron-only audio of this recording. It's basically a short clip of Matt talking about the book, as well as a link to where you, the patrons, can all download the ebook of this book from Matt for free. I think that's really, really cool. So thank you, Kathy, for joining the patrons, and thank all patrons for being a part of the Stark Reflections podcast. Hope you find value in the additional content that you get over at patreon.com/starkreflections. This podcast is also sponsored by Findaway Voices. Now, Findaway Voices is a platform that allows authors the ability to get their audiobooks out into the market. If you have your own audiobook content, like the ones Matt's about to talk about in this interview, you can use Findaway Voices to upload your content and make that available to basically the world's largest distribution of retailer and library audio markets. If you're looking for a narrator, you can actually use Findaway Voices in order to find a professional narrator. And it's not a self-serve process. It's project managed from a resource at Findaway Voices who is assigned to your project and assigned to finding you between maybe 3 and 7 different voices that they think is ideal from their pool of professional narrators around the world that they think is perfect for your project. And then you work with them on finding the right person and obviously working with the narrator. Now, Findaway Voices recently launched the Voices Share program, which allows you to work with a narrator where you don't have to pay for the full value of the narrator, but you pay 50% of the regular rate. So, for example, if it would have been $300 an hour, you can pay $150 an hour, but then the narrator gets a small portion of the royalties. So it's sort of a combination of a royalty share program where, you know, it's not you putting all the money up front, or it's not the narrator investing all that time up front in the hope that they can get money, but it's sort of the best of both worlds, where you don't have to pay as much, but then, of course, you're sharing your royalties in the long term. So again, one of the things I love about this is it's yet another option, it's yet another choice. You can choose how you want to manage this. Matt talks about in this interview not having the money to invest in audiobooks for all of his assets, why he decided to narrate the books himself. But you can learn more about Findaway Voices and how you might be able to take advantage of some of the options that they offer you as an author over at starkreflections.ca/Findaway. Now, just a brief personal update. As I mentioned in the previous episode, this week, the last week of August, as I'm recording this, I'm in Oklahoma City, and I'm spending the week at the Draft Digital offices. It's going to be fun. Dan and Kevin and I will be doing another one of the Ask Us Anything sessions, which is taking place on a Thursday. And let me just double check the date. I guess it's Thursday, August 29th at 4 p.m. Eastern, or 3 p.m. Central Time, and I am in Central Time right now. And then really fun event is WriterCon is taking place in Oklahoma City this weekend. And on the Friday night, Draft to Digital is hosting an open house from 7 p.m. until 10 p.m. So I guess as you get this in your feed, it'd be, if you're listening to this on the day that it comes out, which is Friday, August 30th, that is the night that we're hosting an open house at the Draft to Digital offices and having authors come in for drinks and food and just get a chance to meet the people behind the scenes, which I absolutely love. I love when writers get the chance to meet the people who are doing all the hard work. And again, it's not Dan and Kevin and I that are doing all the hard work, but it's all the other people that we work with in the office who are making things happen, who are developing the stuff, who are putting together some of the creative and the projects and assisting authors and answering their phone calls and emails, etc. What a wonderful opportunity to see behind the scenes. The only other thing in terms of a personal update is, wow, is my back ever sore? So last Thursday, Liz and I went on a quick overnight camping trip, and we like to go to the place. It's less than a 2-hour drive from where we live, and it's at Point Farms, which is north of Goderich, Ontario, on Ontario's west coast. It's a beautiful park, and the dogs are welcome there, and there's a place we can go down to the beach where we can actually have some privacy, because one of our dogs just doesn't get along well with others. So, he's a good dog, but he just can't seem to make friends with other animals. And so Indiana loves to play in the water. He's a golden retriever. He loves to fetch. He's not good at fetch on land, but in the water, he loves chasing after sticks and bringing them back. Or mostly bringing them back, because he's not quite he doesn't quite get retrieving in the full sense. He gets about maybe 3/4 of it or half of it, right? But he has such a good time attacking the waves and playing in the water. So Lake Huron is dramatically higher than it has been in the years we've been going there. And you have to take this walk down an escarpment, probably 100, 150, maybe 200 feet down this escarpment. And there's sets of stairs to help you get down there. And there's no beach because the water is so high. So we went right into the water. We had a fun time playing. And Indy never wants to come out of the water. So when we finally get him out of the water, we want him to dry off. So we're up maybe about 30 feet up on sort of a platform that has a bench, part of the stairs on the way up the hill. And we tie Indy up there so he doesn't go back into the water, because he just wants to go back in the water and stay there all day. And we're sitting there drying off and trying to get the dogs to dry off. And I wear these the same shoes that I wear for running, the Minimus, the really, really thin-soled running shoes. And so I was wearing them in the water, and there was a lot of sand in them because the waves were high and there was a lot of sand getting kicked up. So I took my shoes off and I went to go down the stairs down to the water so I could rinse them and get some of the sand out, leaning in and getting filling them with water and sort of emptying the sand out of the bottom of them. And as I started to go down, Indy started to whine because he thought I was going to go play in the water without him. So I thought, okay, this is torture for this poor guy. So I tried to rush down the stairs so that, it would be anxiety for less time for him. And as I get to the bottom of the stairs, I have my shoes off, and the last maybe 6 or 7 stairs towards the water are, because of the splashing of the water and the waves coming in, are slick. And I didn't realize. And so I have a shoe in each hand. I'm rushing down the stairs, and I hit the top slick stair, and my heel goes right out from underneath me, and I land hard on my back on the stairs, and of course bounce my way down into the water, and knock the wind out of myself. Completely excruciating pain. And again, because I have shoes in my hands, which I stupidly hung on to instead of just throwing them and trying to reach out with my hands for support, I landed. My back was scratched. It hurt. Liz couldn't even see. She thought I'd stubbed my toe because she heard me yell out. I often stub my toe or bump my head on things. Those are the two most common injuries I have. And I'm laying on at the bottom of the stairs, sort of half in the water, half on the stairs. I can barely get up. It took me a few minutes just to be able to get up to my feet, and it was excruciating. And so I had this long scrape down my back, but also there were very few bruises showing, but really, really hurt. And so that was on last Thursday, and it is Wednesday, the 28th, as I'm recording this, and I guess over the next few days, the left lower side, like sort of the back of my ribs, has just been excruciating. If I cough, if I sneeze, just horrible pain, and it actually started to get worse once I arrived in Oklahoma on Sunday, and it's really frightening. Fortunately, the bruising is starting to come up, and I can see on the back of my ribs like this big nasty bruise coming up, so good that it's not internal bleeding, but it's just been, I'm getting in and out of vehicles, or I'm getting in and out of chairs, and walking. I feel like I'm walking like Tim Conway's Oldest Man character from that he used to do on the Carol Burnett show, if you're familiar with that. So it's funny. I mean, I turned 50 earlier this year, and I've taken plenty of falls. Actually, when I was younger, I used to want to be a stuntman. I used to throw myself downstairs, and I used to do all kinds of tumbles and falls, Chevy Chase style. And I guess I realized, like, I'm 50. Thank goodness I didn't break a hip, because that's, it's sort of it's a different sort of look at mortality, which is kind of important. Thinking about this is the topic of this episode, and Matt talking about the final letter. Yeah, we talk about a whole bunch of amazing things about his writing journey and his writing career, but thinking about your mortality as a writer and thinking about the final letter, I think, is really, really important. And so, even though I went into a little bit more detail about my old man fall down the stairs, I just want to enunciate the importance of thinking about that, and thinking about you as a creative, and thinking about what's going to happen if I fell down the stairs and I didn't actually get back up. What would have happened to my IP if I didn't have the final letter? So again, not to be too sobering early on, and not to be too reflective too early on, but I thought, hey, that ties in quite nicely to my personal update. But enough about the updates and the pre-matter in this episode. Let's get right to the interview with Matt Buchman. Hey, Matt, great to see you again.
Hey there, Mark.
So I need to get caught up on all the amazing things that you have been up to, which include a new nonfiction book, a new style, like a new subgenre for the books you're writing, and audiobooks. I mean, where do we begin? I know where to begin.
I hope good, because I don't.
Let's begin by starting off you becoming a full-time writer, when that was, and how that happened for you.
Wow. Okay. Well, I started writing back in 93. I wrote my first novel in 93, sold it to a tiny little press in 97. Then I went out and I did the classic, get 440 rejections from traditional publishing. And I finally sold a book to a romance house in 2010 that turned out to be a 4-book sale that turned out to be a 13-book sale. And that sort of launched my career, because in the middle of it, I was already doing indie publishing a little bit in the background. And in the middle of it, I put out this little Christmas book that popped. At the same time, as the bottom of the recession, I got laid off again from 30 years of being a project manager. So I call it transition by terror. And yeah, and it was. I could not get back into the workforce. They were not rehiring middle managers. But I had this little book contract, and I had this one book that had popped and sold 400 or 500 copies out of the blue on the first month.
And it's traditionally published.
There were 4 that were at that moment. There were 2 of the 4 were traditionally published, and then I put out this little Christmas book indie.
Oh, and that was the self-published one that had sold that many.
Right.
Okay.
Right. And the self-published one is the one that popped, because traditional, of course, had started building me an audience. And so this indie book went out and popped, and it was like, my wife, bless her, said, let's take the gamble.
Really?
And so we dumped everything, the dream house that I had designed and built and now had renters in it because of an earlier episode of the recession. And we moved to this crappy place out on the Oregon coast. The section of coast wasn't crappy, just the place we ended up in.
Okay.
And I wrote like a demon. And I put out 8 or 10 books a year for the next 6 years, which was 6 years ago. So I now have 60 novels. I have 100 short stories. I have 30 audiobooks, just to keep myself out of trouble. And it worked. I've been a full-time writer since January of 2013.
Okay, so let's go back to the book that popped. You said you called it a Christmas novel, like a novella, like a shorter one. What was that?
What I did in my contract was I said, and they missed it. I had 2 separate clauses that basically said I kept all the rights to the world under 60,000 words.
Oh, okay.
So they were buying 85,000 word novels.
Okay.
So I wrote a 40,000 word. I took characters from the world, and he was a background character that people had liked. And so I just wrote him a Christmas romance and made it these are all military romantic suspense. And everybody went, Daniel, and Daniel's Christmas has been my single best-selling book ever. It continues to sell 6 years later.
Really? So people just love Daniel. They need it. Well, see, this illustrated an important point, is that there was a thirst in readers for shorter fiction, for maybe niche into a character that they just wanted more of, obviously, that they experienced him and wanted to see this. And interesting that it was Christmas. Was there any particular reason why you went with that? Was it just the time of year you were releasing it, or?
It was time of year I was releasing it. I also love a good Christmas story. And so it actually became the Night Stalkers was my first big series. And so it became the Night Stalkers White House holiday series. And it has 4 Christmas novels and 2 July 4th novels, because it's military. So I celebrated July 4th.
Okay.
I would put one of these out every holiday for 4 years. And it's just this wonderful little 6-novel, 40,000 word each series that really continues to sell.
Wow. So you've had some huge success with the Night Stalkers and the different romantic military suspense.
Yeah. Just a brief clip of my brain is I can't help but tell the side story. So I started with the Night Stalkers, which are military secret helicopter. And then that became the firefighting helicopter team, which also then spun off a Delta Force team. And each of these then had like other small side series, like the White House holiday series. So I ended up writing 11 series simultaneously.
Wow.
And if you want a way to really confuse your readership, write 11 series simultaneously, because they keep going, oh, but I want the next. Oh, yeah, that's going to be 2 years out. That doesn't work. Don't go there. Just don't go there. I'm down to 2. I'm very excited. It's taken me 3 years to get down to 2 series.
To get them back down to 2 series.
Yeah.
Now, do you have, for your fans, for your readers, do you have maps or guidebooks into how these different things intersect with one another in your universe?
I have several drafts of one and none that I'm happy with.
Okay.
So there are none that are public.
Okay.
On my website, there's a where do I begin thing.
Okay.
And it'll talk you through some of the basics of how to read into it. But most of the romance is actually wrapped around my first character, which is Emily Beale. Everybody will read anything with Emily Beale in it. So I finally call it the Emily Beale Universe. And I'm now trying to figure out how to create a map for readers of the Emily Beale Universe.
Okay.
Because she created so many of these spin-offs, and she keeps like gratuitously appearing in future books. Just I can't keep her out.
She just wants to be part of it all. So
Yeah.
the other thing that I find interesting is, so I know people would maybe compare you to Suzanne Buchman and other writers that are well known in traditional publishing, writing a similar genre. But as a man writing romance, usually women will hide the fact that they're women when they publish, because historically, and J.K. Rowling, they use initials and stuff like that. Is that the reason why you went with M.L. Buchman for writing romance?
It was in two ways. One was the traditional publisher felt that America wasn't ready to have a male romance author.
Okay.
And in the first couple of years, I cannot begin to tell you how many fan mails I got that said, I never would have picked you up if I'd known you were male. I'm so glad I did.
Okay.
So those finally tapered off around 2016. But 2012 to 2016, I was getting those almost daily.
Okay. So they never, that like in the biography, there was a picture that it was a man that had written this?
No picture.
Oh, okay.
And the first 10 books, the bio was gender non-specific.
Okay.
My spouse and I,
okay. Yeah.
And then if you went to my website, it was an open pen name.
Okay.
So you then got my picture, but it's still not on the front page of the website.
Once they loved your writing, then it's like, okay, I'm a guy.
Yeah.
So, okay.
And the other thing that I liked about it was, women had to go to so much trouble to hide who they were behind their initials.
Right.
So many decades. It was like, turnabout is fair play. And so, I was really okay with hiding behind my initials.
Speaking about gender roles and the books, I love the catchphrase that you use for your romance.
Strong women and the men they deserve.
Okay, cool. Love that.
It took me years to realize every single story I've ever written is that. That's just what I write. And from my early science fiction that I wrote 25 years ago, I look at it and sure enough, it's strong women and the men they deserve.
Cool. So that is fantastic.
Yeah, it took me years to find that phrase, but I had been doing it all along.
That's kind of cool to find this underlying current in your fiction and to be able to turn that into, that's your log line, not a log line for a particular book.
Right.
Yeah. That's fantastic. So you have been, it's been a while since we caught up, and I know you've been very busy in the last couple of years.
Yeah, boredom isn't one of my issues.
No. You've moved more into audiobooks. I'd love to hear a little bit about that.
Well, I saw the audio revolution coming the way the ebook revolution was coming, but there was no way that I could drop this big chunk of change for every single audiobook on the chance that it would earn out eventually.
Right.
Because we were really scary close to the margin in that transition by terror. We bet a third of our savings on me being able to turn it into a career. And we spent that there. We lost money for year one, broke even year two, and started making the money back, came back to break even year three. Sorry, year one, we stopped loot. We just sank.
Right.
And then leveling up. But I knew I wanted to get another leg on the stool. I wanted to get the audio out there because I talk to people around me and it's like, oh yeah, I listen to audio all the time when I go to work. Oh, sure. You in audio yet? I'd love to listen to your books. And you hear that enough times. And so I have this voice, and this low male voice reading romance struck me as a good idea. And way, way back, I spent about 4 years working in live theater as a sound man and electrician. So I knew the principles of recording and engineering sound. So I just started. And my first couple short stories, oh God, they're miserable, but they're recorded.
Right.
And what's evolved is I've become a huge fan of read by author.
Really?
Because
For fiction too?
For fiction especially. Because read by author is, okay, getting me on one of my talks here. I'll try to circuit it. But like Stephen King should never read his own books. You listen to Stephen King and he reads his book. But he is the master of the breath and the punctuation and timing and pacing, and the only way you get to hear that is if Stephen King is reading his book.
Right.
The other narrators are putting their own interpretation on it. No, I want to hear Stephen King make me stop breathing because using the same 12 punctuation marks I do. And he can make your heart just, and so I love that, hearing the author's voice reading their own work, I think is a really good match.
Right.
If people argue with me, oh no, not my voice. It's like, no, you're the perfect voice for your book.
Yeah, because you know exactly the intent for the words. I mean, listening to King's On Writing, which I've listened to multiple times. I think I've read it once or twice in print or ebook or whatever. But listening to him do On Writing is perfect. Yeah.
And that one, I tell people not to listen to that one when I'm giving an example, because he's pretty passionate about writing.
Okay.
If you listen to him reading Dark Tower, is actually an example of what I was talking about. He reads Dark Tower.
Okay.
But he reads it brilliantly, just with no emotion, no drama, he just reads it. But he's just got that pace and that rhythm, and it's as he intended those words.
Elevation, one of his last books. Did he read Elevation? Because I know I listened to it. I remember the treadmill I was on for most of listening to that book. It's funny how you have these visuals. But did he read it? I can't remember now.
I can't either. But so the whole read by author has a panache that a lot of people like. And yes, there are people who will follow a famous narrator through anything they read anywhere. Well, I want people to follow this narrator, which is the same philosophy as the writer. That's why I don't have pseudonyms. I'm M.L. Buchman in science fiction, in fantasy, in romance, and now in thrillers, because I want people to follow this narrator, this voice.
Okay.
Now, and I have fans who have read right through every single book I've ever written, which was astonishing to me when I first met my first super fan. I was, oh my God. And they said, no, I've read everything you've ever written. I pulled out my little catalog and I said, oh, really? And they said, yeah, I had trouble getting into the science fiction, but it was like, nobody's read that book.
That's funny. So let's talk a little bit about, you talked about writing a straight up thriller. So that is a new thing for you. Can you tell us about this new project?
Yeah. It's, I've written a couple lighthearted thrillers with a romance strain before, my Dead Chef series, but my voice has been being squirrely lately. I've been trying to find where 60 novels in and 100 short stories, I'm still trying to find my voice. And part of what I found was I write a lot of military romantic suspense. And I started getting reviews, gee, this is almost more of a thriller than a romance. And I went over to the side and I tried writing some contemporary romances. And those contemporaries with the same star rating were selling a half to a third what the military was. And it's like, did I just move away from my voice? So I never read my reviews, but I went out and had my assistant sweep every single Amazon review, Kobo review, everything they could find. And I made a tag cloud. I did one of those word cloud things.
Okay.
And the words that were popping were exciting, suspenseful, dramatic, action. Gee, maybe my voice is over in thriller, which is, I've been getting more and more of these kind of reviews. And I love thrillers. I love them. And you have to love a genre to write in it. And so I decided to write a pure thriller. And actually, as a challenge to myself as a writer, it's the first book I've ever written that has no romantic backbone at all. It is pure military techno thriller. Now, because I love that gender role reversal, the leader of my team is a very strange, very intelligent woman, and a new team that she has no idea what to do with because she's not socially apt. And I had a blast writing it. So it's coming out in November. I of course have one.
Yeah.
It's Drone.
Okay.
By ML Buchman. It's a Miranda Chase NTSB thriller. It's a National Transportation Safety Board, right? The people who investigate crashes.
Okay.
And you would think, oh, that's not exciting and dramatic, but of course it gets wrapped up in a military conspiracy and a political conspiracy and becomes this whole technological fun thing. And number 2 will be out in December, and number 3 will be out in January. So I'm investing about 6 months of time to see if my voice is actually over in thriller.
Wow. Well, that'll be good. I look forward to catching up with you to see how this new series does. Because one of the things I've always admired about you was you approach the business of it. I mean, yes, you write about what you're passionate about, and you stick to the voice that, the stories you want to tell or need to tell.
Mm-hmm.
But you're always very analytical. I mean, it was, Buchman spreadsheets and it was tracking, right? So I'm sure you did that from day one as you invested your savings
to
this business.
No, I have the last 7 years of every hour I've written versus done administration. I also have tracked my unit sales by title, by vendor. And I was a project manager for 30 years. I specialized in disaster projects. Oh, Y2K is coming and we're using 1960s equipment. Let's bring in Matt. Oh, we just bought this whole other firm and we are 2 completely different entities. Let's bring in Matt.
Okay.
And I would do these 4 to 5 year renovations of corporations in how they literally functioned at a very base level. And so I just apply that to my own business.
Okay. Now, on the business track, there's something that I think is critically important for writers, because this is your livelihood, right? This is what you do. This is how you earn a living. This is your day. This is your week. This is your month, your year. And something not a lot of writers think about is, okay, when I have a regular job with a pension, etc., and something happens to me, my spouse and children, they can benefit from that. But when you're a writer, when you're self-employed, oh God, what happens? And why did you take so much time to try to help other writers by producing the book we're obviously talking about?
It was actually pretty funny. I'm going along, and I know that I've told my family that my intellectual property can earn money for up to 70 years after my death. Copyright law. Great. There, I've informed them. And one day my wife says, our kid is really, really afraid of what happens when you die. And I was like, well, that's not a bad thing to have. She said, no, you're writing. She's terrified of what this block of stuff coming to her is, and she knows nothing about. Her field is autism. It's not publishing. Suddenly I realized that she had no tools. I had given her no tools to understand what to do with this massive IP that I've been building that could support her and her kids and maybe her grandkids. And so it took me over a year to break it down and try to find some way to explain in English what you can do with an author's estate. And the more I researched it, the more I discovered that nobody is handling this well. And what I finally came up with is I call it your final letter, and you need to write it now. And the concept is, in English, say, okay, this is what I'm giving you. This is intellectual property. Oh, hey, maybe I should describe what the word intellectual property means. Get it all the way back to English. And this is what publishers are. And because so much of my catalog is indie published, I have 13 traditional titles, and the other 140 are all indie published. And I'm trying to get the rights back on those 13. But how can you manage that? And I figured out there are 5 different ways you can manage that. And so I broke those down, and they change your level of involvement, but they also change your level of income. So it's a choice. And I ended up writing this 14-page single-space letter, all in cheery English, going, okay, I'm dead. Where are my files? What is this stuff? Where's the money? And the more I talked about it, the more people started responding. And the joke was, I was watching a loop, an email loop, and every now and then somebody types something, and it's sort of like the unforgivable. It's so wrong. You have to take your hands away and not respond because it's just so wrong. And I finally said, no, I got to respond. And I put in my 5 different ways you can manage an estate answer. Suddenly, Suzanne Brockman, who created the genre I write in, she personally created military romantic suspense, pops up in my personal email and says, is there more to this? Okay, here's the draft, here's the letter, and my draft ideas that I was trying to put together a book. And she came back with some brilliant suggestions, turned it into a book, and I've given that talk now at a couple of major conferences, local RWA chapters, because we've got to do something to get our estates managed, or they die.
Right.
And I've got a ton of examples in the book on all the ways things have been done stupid and ways things have been done smart.
So historically, and it's not just indie authors, right? Traditionally published authors, right? That's where some of the horror stories actually come from, right? What does the family do with the estate when the author has died?
Yeah. I mean, 2 short examples. Jane Austen went out of print about 2 years after she died. 10 years later, her family sold the 6 Jane Austen books, which are the seminal books of romance, to a publisher because they didn't think they were worth anything. They sold it for the equivalent of 250 copies of the book.
Wow.
And they haven't been out of print since because they were such important books, but the family didn't tend it well. Octavia Butler, the queen of science fiction, I mean, MacArthur Award winner, one of the most seminal female science fiction writers there is out of print. People are losing her name because she has an agent who won't talk to anybody for less than a movie deal. So you can't get a short story for an anthology. The novels are going away. She's been dead 12 or 13 years, and her legacy is disappearing daily. She's only in the used market now, I think. I don't think she's even in print.
Wow.
It's just a crime. And her heirs, whoever they are, need to find a way to rip this out of this guy's hands.
Right.
But a favorite example on the other side is Lucia Berlin hit the New York Times list. She wrote 70 short stories. She had a collection, The Manual for Cleaning Women, hit the New York Times bestseller list in 2015, and it sat there. And she just released another anthology this year, and it went back up to the list. Except she died in 2004 as an unsuccessful writer. Her heirs figured out what these 70 short stories could do because they got a lot of critical acclaim. She just couldn't turn it into money.
Right.
And they have now hit the New York Times list twice with her estate, and it's helping them.
Wow. So not only her legacy, but her family's actually able to earn money from that IP.
Right.
Wow.
And so it was, could I figure a way to make my IP accessible to my heirs, where it's, because if you don't, it's going to end up in the garbage, because they're going to go, well, okay, I get this ever decreasing little check from Amazon, and after 5 years it turns into 2 sales a month, and they don't know why and don't know what to do with it. Let me find a way to teach them how to manage it, even if the way they manage it is they hire a company to manage it for them.
Okay.
Or give it to Red Cross or your college, but keep a share.
Yeah.
So there you're completely hands off. You say, here, but you owe me a share of this for managing the estate and making money off it.
Wow.
So I wrote a little book called Estate Planning for Authors, Your Final Letter and Why You Need to Write It Now.
Yeah. And don't put it off.
Don't put it off. But actually what I did was I wrote the book to also be right for heirs whose IP creators didn't do it.
Okay.
So it's like, okay, you can pick up the book and it's like, here's how to organize your final letter. And if they didn't, here's what this means. And if they didn't, here's how to approach this. And I talk about everything from how to organize your files, making sure your will talks about intellectual property, when you start thinking about a trust, and, how to just talk to your heir. You got to sit down with them. When I finally sat down with this 14-page letter with my kid, and we spent about 3 hours going over it paragraph by paragraph, and I got back all this feedback of, I don't get this section.
Oh.
Great.
Let me so I can talk section about it now. Right. Yeah. So yeah, that's good.
And so in the book, I actually give a copy of the final letter. But the other thing is, you've got to organize the IP. I lost one of my covers once. Little cover, didn't matter much, but I couldn't find it. It wasn't in science fiction. It wasn't with a story. It wasn't over in covers. It wasn't. And I finally realized that I had no idea where my stuff was and how it was arranged. So I took a day and I organized everything. Never found the stupid cover, but
you found all the other ones though.
Yeah, but I got it all arranged so it's all in one neat place. And then I have an Excel file, one Excel file that has every single thing I've ever published and where it's published on what date. And it's one line per title. And there's no big formulas or anything. It's very simple. And I give you that in the book. I say, here's my format, because they need to have some way that they can hand this to a publishing firm and say, and there's so many small virtual assistants and so on. Here's the IP. Do you know what to do with this? And they'll go, oh my God, it's all organized. I can see it. I can see where it is. And it takes nothing to maintain that. It takes me a minute to enter a brand new piece of IP. I'm done.
So the example might be, this is a story that was published here and the rights revert back on this date. It could be a contract with a publisher. It could be something that was self-published. And what right, if you've sold any rights, or if you still have all rights, what formats they're released in. So ebook, print, audio, etc.
What their ISBN numbers are. If it's under contract, what's the 35-year reversion date?
Okay.
And I find I always have to define that one. Most people don't know about it. The U.S. copyright law contemplates that beginning artists of any kind will sign a bad contract in order to get a contract.
Right. Okay.
And so they give you an out, which is at 35 years after initial contract, you can simply reach out, grab those rights, and pull them back.
Really?
Legally. Yeah, and that's I believe that's international copyright law. So, okay, my first title was signed only 9 years ago, but I'll still be alive, hopefully, when 35 comes up, because those first 4 books, I signed a contract knowing cost of business, I was probably never going to see these titles back.
Right.
at 35 years, I can reach out and grab them.
Really? Just 35 years. Okay.
Now, Creedence, for example, Creedence Clearwater Revival, they're suddenly starting to crop back up. The reason is their initial contract, they gave away everything, including their name. They aren't Creedence Clearwater Revival, they're Creedence Clearwater. And they lost the name in the contract.
Wow.
So they had to rename themselves. All those great hits that they sing, they're not making the money on.
Oh, no.
They're making the touring ticket money, but the rights money is going to the original manager.
Wow.
Well, they've hit 35 years. They're starting to pull back the rights.
Oh, so they can be CCR again.
Yeah.
And actually make money.
And actually make money.
Wow. I see a good moon rising there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow. I never realized that they had done that. That's quite amazing.
And the Beatles recorded over 35 years ago. And they're looking at pulling back some of those titles. Now there's a narrow window that you have to implement this 35-year rule.
Oh, okay.
But that's in the copyright handbook by Nolo Press, which I tell everybody they should read, no matter how boring it is. But this is your business. And so I tried to summarize all this in a little 100-page book.
Excellent. Well, thank you for sharing that. Now, the one final thing to ask, because you do approach writing as a business in a very strategic way, which I follow and pay attention to the things you do, because they're usually the very smart things to do. What are some of the places, because you look at your time and how you spend your time, right? This time writing, this time admin, this time whatever. You also spend time going to be in physical locations with other writers, with other people from the industry. What are the ones that are valuable to you?
I do it in two different tiers. Okay. I go to a couple conferences a year. I've gone to RWA National a few times lately. I don't know that I'll ever go back, because it's about the people. And it's meeting the people, and the last one was near me, so that was useful.
Right. So it's just to network with other writers and other folks from the industry.
In 4 days, they run 16 sessions per hour from 9 to 5. I made it to 4 sessions in 4 days. But my shortest day on the floor was 17 hours because I was in meetings with people continuously. I go to NINC, the Novelists Incorporated conference, which is fantastic. That's my marker every year. Next year, I'm going to International Thriller Writers.
Okay.
So I try to
limit.
Yeah, I limit myself to 2 conferences a year, or try to.
Okay.
Then, but I've set up mastermind groups. Some are phone call based. I have somebody I talk with for 2 hours every 3 weeks. And I have 2 groups that I meet with about every 6 weeks. We just had one on Saturday where we met for 5 hours. And it's 6 pro writers sitting in a room, and all we talk is business. We don't talk about, oh, I got stuck on this plot point, because I'm one of the baby writers in that room. I'm sitting there with New York Times bestsellers, and because, I don't know, I'm lucky or something. I'm the one who organized it, actually. I'm the one who started tracking people down and said, would you like to come to this? Would you? And getting that view of business from other people's points of view is so useful. It's so powerful.
Right.
Sharing those ideas. And our mutual friend, Dean Wesley Smith, he and we used to live half a mile from each other. And so twice a week we would walk for an hour and all we talked was business.
Really? So you're getting exercise and you're exercising the brain.
Yeah. Okay. And I really miss that. He moved to Las Vegas. I moved to the East Coast, but we actually were doing that twice a week, every Tuesday and Thursday.
Oh, that's fantastic.
And I filled it in some with these every 6-week groups, but you can't function in isolation with how fast this industry is changing.
Right.
It just, That's why we had 5 pros who talked for 5 hours on Saturday, because we learned that much in the prior 6 weeks.
Wow. It's amazing.
Yeah.
And I know we're going to be seeing each other at NINC in just a few weeks, which I always look forward to. Because again, there's a chance to hang out with some really smart writers and learn from them as well. But where can my listeners find out more about you and check you out online?
Everything is ML Buchman, MLBuchman.com, Twitter, Facebook. They're all ML Buchman. I managed to pin that down.
Awesome.
I answer my email within a day or two. If I don't, ping me again. You can reach me through my website, and I'm distributed wide, so you can find my books, my audiobooks, which we barely graced off, actually. But yeah, I've got 30 read by author audiobooks now, and I'm putting out about 2 more a month.
Wow.
And they're wide distribution.
Excellent. Well, Matt, thank you so much for taking the time to hang out, for investing the time in chatting with me today.
I'm crazy rabid about the estate planning. It's a hot button for me. People need to, not because, it's my legacy, I need my legacy to continue. You're supporting your family, or you're supporting a charity you believe in, or how can you throw that away? It just makes me crazy. And so that's actually why I finally wrote the book, and why I go around talking about it. And I keep trying to get more conferences to let me talk about estate planning, just for that. I'm not a lawyer. It's just a lot of research on the practical steps. We help the future with what we're doing in the present.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, Matt, thanks again so much for spending the time with me today.
Always great to talk to you, Mark.
I was going to reflect on the importance of the last letter and managing your IP, but I already reflected on that prior to the interview, but it's just a really, really good reminder for writers. I'm going to reflect on something else, but I do want to let listeners know that you have a chance to win one of 2 print copies of the book if you leave a comment on episode 92 at starkreflections.ca. You can leave a comment, you can ask a question, you can share one of your own reflections, however you want to interact. And I'm going to do a random draw, and there will be 2 copies that I'll give out, and I'll do that the end of September. The deadline will be, let me just look at a quick calendar to give it a reasonable go. I guess the deadline will be September. It'll be September 27th for that. So if you want to get a chance for a print copy of the book, just leave a comment there. All patrons have been given a link to download a free copy of the ebook version. So in this particular case, I'm going to do the 2 copies for print copies for listeners. And just to sort of highlight the fact that this is an important thing that I think we should all be thinking about as writers. Now, one of the things I wanted to reflect on was I love the processes that Matt used. For example, taking a full day just to outline where everything was, which is important. It's a wonderful logistical thing to do. And I'm in the process I've been in the process of trying to get that organized, because I have files on 3 different computers and backed up in 4 different ways, using Dropbox and Google Drives and OneDrive and other backup processes. But I really need to put everything together, because I have had the case where I was looking for the original Adobe file for a cover design so I could make a modification to it, and it was like I can't find it anywhere. So that's kind of important. But one of the other things that I thought was interesting was he described having taken reviews and creating a word cloud from reviews, having someone do that for him to determine the common phrases and what was resonating with readers, and use that to determine if he was going to write straight up thrillers. Now, I know people suggest that writers should never look at their reviews. So if it's a positive review, it just feeds your ego and doesn't really help you. If it's a negative review, it obviously probably hurts far more than the positive ones help, because we tend to focus on the negative. But I think one way that reviews can help is that exact thing. Is looking at the way the word cloud looked at what was resonating with writers. So let's say you're trying to rewrite the log line or the description for your book. So, that bolded first line that's meant to hook a potential reader and turn them into a buyer. So looking at commonalities, or even things that people took the time to write into a review, can actually be beneficial, because somebody not only thought enough about the book that they wanted to leave a review for it, but they share usually what it is about the book that resonated with them, and that can be that personal thing that can help you find that element. Because sometimes we're so, when you look at one of your novels, you look at, there's so many details, there's so many complexities, and there's subplots and so much going on. But it's those things that stick out with readers that we could potentially find from reviews. So again, you have to develop a bit of a thick skin, but it may be a worthwhile process. It may be a way, especially if you're struggling to find what that thing is, that hook, that moment, that passion. And that's something that I think was important when we look at some of the stuff that I was reflecting on with Matt's interview. How about you? What is it that you reflect on? What is it that you thought was interesting or worth talking about? Feel free to share that, of course, in the comments for this episode at starkreflections.ca, and this is episode 92. Well, I hope you found some value in this interview with Matt Buchman. I hope you enjoyed the reflections, and I look forward to connecting with you again next week in episode 93 of the Stark Reflections podcast. Again, this is your host, Mark Leslie Lefebvre, wishing you great writing and good Stark Reflections.
Thank you for listening to the Stark Reflections podcast. You can find show notes for each episode at starkreflections.ca.
The music for this podcast, Laser Groove, was composed and produced by Kevin MacLeod. Check out more of Kevin's great music at incomptech.com.